the administration asked me to talk about was turntable animation, and it's actually a fairly simple subject. It's that, you know, sometimes when you create a model for somebody to, you know, hand off or get approved, or even when you're just trying to show off your model, you know, say you're trying to get a demo reel together and all you've done is model up to this point or try and make models, you know, which is totally fine. You need a way to show them off, and there's sort of a standard way that people do that called a turntable animation, and like this is one of them, right? And it's just like you would think. It's just the model apparently just spinning around 360 degrees, and somebody can get a look at it and look at all sides, and you know, that's basically the concept. So like I said, the idea is just to kind of, you know, show you what they mean by that and what people expect out of this. It's definitely not a time to get fancy or try anything, you know, cool with this. It's just, this is the way that things are sort of presented. Okay, so the way you want to do that is you create yourself either, you know, some people do them like this one that I just showed here, where it's like on white Limbo, which is totally fine. But when they talk about turntable, they literally, you know, are like kind of talking about like a disc that's that your object sort of sits on and just casts some shadows down. Once again, not a point to get fancy. There's no need to make it marble or anything like that, you know. So I'm just going to create a really simple, divide it up a little bit. Just once again, just a real simple little disc for our dude to stand on. And then instead of, you know, you might think that you take the object and, you know, like parent it to this and then rotate this around, but you know, you can sort of mess up things if your object has, you know, if you've got all this rigged together and then all of a sudden you're parenting it to this and to this turntable, you can have problems. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to spin the camera around it, right? And to do that sort of perfectly in a loopable fashion, what we're going to do is put the camera on follow a spline, right? So if we go over to curves and surfaces, I can get myself a circle with the, you know, the first thing in the curves and surfaces shelf. Okay, I'm gonna zoom that guy out, or not zoom, but scale it up or so, you know, a bit, bring it up about to there. Okay, so this is going to be my path, and you know, you can change this as you go, which is nice. So you just need to get it roughly in place. But if you go out like about to there, you know, for depending on the size of the object. Obviously, if this was an aircraft carrier, you'd need a bigger circle. Okay, so we've got that done, and then we're just going to come in and we're going to create ourselves a camera, like so. And it doesn't matter where it's at, you know, to start out with. So I'm gonna, actually I'll do it down here, look through selected. Okay. Okay. So to do this, and you know, this is sort of a trick that applies to any animation. It's just, this is the first time that we're going to use it. Is, you know, you can make any object follow a spline as its motion path. And we talked a little bit about motion last week and how you can make keys, you know, here, and here. You know, once again, an easy, one way to do it also is to draw splines and attach those objects to the splines, which can be a really great way to do it if you're looking to do something very like, very precise, right? Like if you were, you know, say you had like the innards of a radio or something like that, or a stereo or something, and you wanted to fly in between the little bits and pieces and all this stuff, you know, if you know, trying to sort of find your way through there and make that motion path could be a real pain. But just drawing a path that goes in and out of the things you want to go in and out of is a whole lot easier. So you know, motion on a path can be a real lifesaver, you know, especially also comes in really handy when you're trying to do a really big move where, you know, you're starting here but coming down to a really small area. You know, next semester when you get more into animation, you'll see, like, you know, sort of visualizing that motion can be really difficult because the scale goes from, you know, huge to teeny tiny, and controlling that, and like I said, sort of visualizing it can be harder than you think, right? So a path allows you to know, okay, you know, I'm going to start here, but I'm going to zoom in and, you know, cruise in and out of the arms or something like that. So my scale is from, you know, way out here to all the way in here. So, but anyways, for this instance, what we're going to do is just use it for our camera, right? So I'm going to come back over here to the animation workspace, right? And so up here, what you have is some things called constraints, right? And we didn't really talk much about those, except for like the parent, you know, how you can parent things together. There's also a parent tool in here, and there's some other types of constraints, and all the constraints are is exactly what they sound like. They constrain, you know, objects to other objects, or, you know, or in different ways. You know, like if you look in here real quick, you know, there's an aim, and basically what that means is if you have an object, you know, sitting there, and you wanted another object to always be looking at it or aim toward it, you would put that constraint on it, and that's what that would do. It would make the object, you know, aim toward it. You know, scale constraint is almost just like, it's almost like parenting, except you're only grabbing the scale. And then orient is the same kind of deal, just rotation that, you know, goes with an object. So it's almost like the same thing as parenting. It's just you're doing one of the pieces of parenting. You know, parenting would be scale, rotation, and movement, but you don't have to do all those things, right? Anyways, so but one of the ones we're looking for here today is just a motion path, right? So all we're going to do is select the camera, select the motion path, and attach the motion path. Okay. So now if I play, actually, you know what, let me go back. Sorry, I'm going to get the options for it by, you know, hitting the caret to the side, right? So you can choose, you know, how long you want this to be. Whether you want it to follow, which basically means bank as it goes. If I turn off follow, the camera will not look towards the center the whole time. It'll actually be facing the same direction and just kind of go around. Sometimes you might want that. You never know, right? You can choose your time range that you want this to have. You know, how many frames do you want this object to go through the motion path, right? By default, it's just whatever I'm looking at in my time slider. Here I'm looking at 50 frames. You know, that's not much. So, you know, let's look at what this guy did. So he did an 8-second one, right? So, you know, 8 times 24 is in the, you know, whatever, 160, 170 range or something like that. So I'm gonna just dictate what those are. So I'm gonna say 200 frames. So at frame 100, it's gonna start. You know, since we have a circle here, it's going to start at the start of the circle, and then by frame 200, it'll be back around the circle, right? So let's see. We can skip the rest of these options. Where, you know, like I said, follow. You can mess with the axis if you need to, but in this instance, you know, the default actually works pretty good. So I hit that, and now you see if I go through my time. Actually, let me make my time slider longer. Okay. So I could look at the whole thing. Now you see the camera twirling around the subject in a circle, right? One thing that you want to do to get, if you want this to be loopable, and you do, is, and once again, like next semester, you'll get more into the graph editor. But I think you'll see, like, you see how we have like this sort of sweeping curve here that kind of, you know, that sort of starts out, you know, let's see, how do you explain this? It's more of a gentle curve in that it doesn't just go from point A to point B. That this is showing you, like, you know, literally the motion. So it starts out with very little motion in, you know, going around, and then also this is called ease in and ease out. Like I said, when, you know, next semester this will make total sense to you, but anyways, but we don't want that. So if you'll watch this, actually I'll just play this down and you'll see. We watch this. See how it's now speeding up and then slowing down? See that? That's because of this ease curve here, right? So if you were gonna loop this, right, and put it on continuous loop for somebody to watch, you know, so that would mean the animation would slow down for a weird reason and then start back up, and it wouldn't just be a continuous round and round and round. So what I'm going to do is just make that make these keys linear, which is right there. Sorry. So now you see how these points just go from point A to point B, and if you watch this guy if you watch the camera motion, it never speeds up and it never slows down. So you would never know where that stop point is, because it would just keep going and keep going, right? If I leave it where it was, and actually let's just watch it, look through selected. So I'm going to go back to where I was. Okay, so here's that ease. Here's what your animation would look like if I just left it as is. Okay. So slow start. Ooh, and weird jiggle. See how it's just odd. It doesn't make any sense. Well, I mean, it's not that it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't look right. Okay. So I'm going to fix that by doing what I just undid. Okay. And I'm going to...
Andy, could you show how to attach the camera one more time as well?
Sure. Okay. Constrain. I'm in the animation workspace. Constrain. Grab your camera, then your spline. Motion path. Attach to motion path. Okay. And I did the options too, so that I could change my start and end point. Otherwise, it's just going to do whatever points are out there. I don't know why it's jiggling like that. Hold on a second. I think I need to up the detail of the curve. There it goes, sections. That should do it. Yeah. So one thing I needed to do was I needed to up the, NURBS curves are NURBS curves are just like other surfaces, in that they're divided up, as many times as you tell them to be divided up. So by default, it came in with like 6 or something like that, and that's why the motion was really choppy. You see this weird, because there's a bunch of straightaways. You see the straightaways here in this circle that I created. So I just went into make NURB circle, and I'm going to bump that up to 36, which will make it really, 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 oops, geez, keep moving it, really, really smooth. Which now means when I do my rotation, it'll get rid of that. So now it's just a guy rotating, and that's that. So like I said, what you can do here is you can go back in and like this is a little far away, so you could make the camera zoom in. There's a few ways to remedy this. You could zoom the camera in. Where am I here? Oh, move to there. I could zoom the camera in, like, oops, wrong way, like so, or I could actually move the path, right? So once again, the cool thing is that I could if you shrink since this camera is attached to this path, no matter what happens to the path, the camera is going to go with it and do what it did before, right? So to fix this, or to sort of rezoom this up so that I'm actually looking at my character a little better, I'm gonna just decrease the radius of the spline that I'm using for my circle, right? So now I'm kind of zoomed up on it. Let me see if I can still rotate. I think I can. Yep. So I'm gonna put the guy in the center, or the character in the center. No, it's not gonna like, yeah, it didn't like that. And that's it. So you can move it. Like I said, you can move the path. Like so. And then you just basically set up some very basic lighting. Also, once again, not a big time to get cool with the lighting. Like in this instance, in fact, you want to make sure that it's not lit in any sort of interesting way. So let's see what we got here. Arnold. Oops. Wrong camera. There we go. Yeah, so that's a little nothing, that's okay. I could bring the lights up a little more. Hello. Sorry, my machine's choking here, and I don't know why. There we go. So I could maybe just sort of get a bigger lights to kind of just throw some lights in the scene and keep it simple, like so. Let's see. I may have those settings on from the other day. Nope. It's pretty basic. It's weird, my machine is acting like about a month ago again. Oof. Okay, so anyway, so you see what's going on here. So you could, you don't have to necessarily do this little turntable dealy. If you wanted to make a a white limbo set like you have here, which is basically essentially white seam, nothing. You could do that with like a you could sort of take another, like I'll get rid of the cylinder that I made for the innards. Let's see here. Okay, poly cylinder, high, radius, let's say 48. Okay, so let's see what we got. Okay, so I just take that guy and go back and just display reverse. Just sort of give myself a. There we go. So you just create a ground, and the idea is you make it really big, obviously, so that you don't sort of see the edges. So maybe I'll go even a little bigger here. Okay. And then if I want to get fancy, we could. No, I'm not going to bother. So let's go back to my camera. There it is. There it is. Okay. So in this instance, I could get rid of this. Let me get rid of my grid. And I don't know how that happened. So now he's just standing on the ground, and so this is how this person laid out this one, and like I said, this the problem with this situation though is that there's so much white bouncing around and things like that it'll actually sort of it'll make some fairly nasty render time. So I'm not sure I would do this because it's got to bounce all that white light around and everything. I probably would just stick with the one that we just did. So yeah, okay, turn that up to 15. This one to 12. There we go. Ooh, too much. Yeah, like I said, I'm not sure that this is the best idea, to be honest with you, because like I said, this washes a lot of stuff out, and it also creates some reasonably nasty render time. So like I said, I might not actually go that way unless somebody specifically asks for it. I just put your person on a little cylinder and call it a day, like so. Okay, 8. I wouldn't have his feet stuck in it like that. Like, there we go. There. And then just put, like I said, put a white surface on there, and you're good to go. So, like I said, probably next semester you'll be asked to, hand in a turntable animation of this or that, and this is what they mean by that, and this is how you create it, and then you would just render the sequence out using the rendering tools, and like I said, in the end, what you'll get is a rendered version of what you see here. And 200 frames, this is pretty good, so you get a good look at all the little bits and pieces. Sometimes I actually like to take the spline and actually make it dip a bit by rotating it, like from the front, because if you go this way, you're gonna get, like, if you look on this side, right, the arm coming at you is pretty much the same as if I go over here and I'm looking at the other side. If you give it just a tiny bit of tilt like this, now you'll sort of see underneath the model. See, now you're kind of coming up and looking at it. Now you're kind of coming underneath to check out under here. So especially if you have something that's symmetrical like this, it's a way to sort of get a look at the whole thing. It's not so boring, okay? So yeah, so that's it. So that's a turntable animation. Like I said, you'll probably hear about such things. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about is kind of a cool. We talked about we talked about using the duplicate mesh to do, you know, to obviously duplicate meshes or duplicate objects. Sorry, right? Duplicate by duplicate special. Sorry, so that'll duplicate whatever you need. But there are some other, you know, and duplicate special is a great tool, obviously, but it is sort of limited in that, you know, like if you're trying to make a bunch of stuff, a bunch of, you know, copies of objects, you know, you can translate it, meaning, you know, like if you want to make 10 objects that are 10 units apart, then they're going to go zoop, you know, out in one direction, and that's great, right? But there's other ways to make objects that that are really cool using a snapshot feature, which is available on pretty much all your major programs like this, right? So I'll show you what I mean by that, because this sort of ties in with what I just talked about. So, you know, say that we want to, you know, I'm calling this a Christmas tree, okay? So say I wanted to put, you know, garland stuff on my Christmas tree, right? You know, there's a few ways to go about that, but I'm gonna show you sort of one of the easiest ways, I would say. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna draw myself a path that goes up the tree. I'm gonna just do it in 2 dimensions, sadly to say, right out of the gate, okay? Like so, like so. Okay, so now I've got this swirl, or whatever you want to call it, okay? And now I gotta edit it into place, sadly to say. Oop, shit. Hold on one second. There, okay. So now I'm going to find that spline, wherever the hell it went. There it is. Okay, so there's my spline. Okay, and I'm going to move the control vertices into place so that, you know, it's sort of crawling up the tree, whatever you want to call it, or, you know, winding up the tree. So I'm going to grab everything except the first one at the start. Oh, damn it. There we go. So move that one up. Deselect, move that one up, deselect, move that one, or move, oop, crap. Basically, I'm just sort of spreading these out, right, as I go up the tree. Okay. Up. Okay. Up. And there we go. Okay, so now I have this spline that you know, vaguely goes up the tree. Now, you know, you know, you would spend some time, you know, getting it to sort of be a little more graceful than this, but for you know, this situation, I'm just going to do it real quickly. So I just sort of bash these into place. Okay. Well, like I said, you'd want this to sort of gracefully go around the tree, and if you, let's see. There we go. Oh, no, wrong one. Front, side. Okay. I'm going to go back to wireframe. So I think you see what I'm doing here. So, okay. Okay, so we just wrap that around. If I come back to this guy, I've got a spline that roughly wraps around the tree. You know, like I said, this is not great. In fact, this is pretty bad right here, so I'll fix that. Okay, so that's close enough for now. So what I can do here is then I can say, well, I'm going to put, like I said, that sort of, you know, garlandy stuff or whatever that you know, wraps around, you know, and you could string this any way you want, and, you know, whatever you wanted to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a sphere, right? Come out here, and that's too big, way too big. So we'll say 0.2, 0.35. Yeah. I'm going to bring my subdivisions down so it's not so meaty. That might be a little small, or something like that. There we go. That's pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do what we just did and constrain this to the to this path, right? Okay. And this will make sense in just a second. So, okay, I'm going to come back to perspective mode. Okay, so select the bulb, select the spline, constrain, motion path, attach the motion path. I'm going to just go with what I had before, 1 to 200. Okay, so now what I get is a ball that zip 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 goes up the tree, right? And that's great, but I'm also gonna I'm gonna go in and make sure that that path is linear again. That's this guy right here. And like I said, this will all make a lot more sense next semester. So don't worry if this is a baffling weird graph. It's just we're just kind of dipping into it right now. So like I said, what I get here is this ball that travels up the tree. Okay, and what we're going to do with that is we're going to make snapshots that go all the way through this motion path, right? And there's a bunch of different reasons that they have this feature, but it's also just a great way to duplicate objects, right? So what I'm going to do is go to where am I? Visualize, create animation snapshot, right? And it's sort of similar. And I can say, okay, where do I want to start? Where do I want to end? I want to say 1 through 200 because that's the motion. That's this motion that goes all the way up to the top. Increment. So it's basically how often do I want to make a copy? Every frame, every half a frame, every 2 frame, every 5 frames, blah, 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 blah. Right? So I'm going to say 5 just for starters to see what I get. And I get a bunch of copies along, so now I have a spline and I have all these great copies, right? So let me go down to maybe 2 to make a whole lot of them. That's too many. 3. So now I have, I've made these copies. So this works great for, a bunch, like all kinds of different things. Like say you needed to put, a bunch of, lamp posts right along a hill, right? Well, if you did the duplicate special, they're only going to want to go in a line, right? But it's like if you went in and you said, well, here's the contour of this hill, this bridge. Duplicate using this method where they move along. It's going to plant them down and be on the surface properly. Instead of having to sort of put them one by one in place, it's going to copy them. In a sort of a more controlled way. And you could do everything like that. So if you would make one contour and it would work to duplicate all kinds of stuff that go along the spline, okay? And
does it like duplicating along the spline?
It's literally duplicating along the spline.
If let's say we were making a snake and we wanted it to wrap around something, would we be able to, like, with most of its body that looks exactly the same, duplicate it just around that spline?
A bunch of snakes, do you mean, or
no, just one? If you're making one long snake, and like, let's say we cut off the section from like the body. The head and tail are different parts, but if you want to do a whole bunch of duplicates of the body going up like that, would you be able to?
It'd have to be seamless.
No, you'd actually. It's a good idea, but it's basically what you would want in that instance is a spline deformer, right? Like because you're looking to just have one snake and deform, and deform along that path, and they have a thing to do that. So basically, you can say, here's how I want this object to bend as it goes through this curve. See what I'm saying? So you would wrap that, you would wrap a spline around something, tell the snake object to deform along that spline, and it would follow that spline that happens to also fall around the object that you're trying to wrap around.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this is literally, in this instance, it's, what we're really talking about is just a way to duplicate a bunch of stuff, along a spline, and what that sort of gives you. And I'm gonna double check here. And the cool thing is that this is, since this is procedural and these things are since the spline, the original object was used to make, let's see, the original ball that went through the spline is still available, and the spline is still available. I can make changes to the spline after the fact. So like, if I wanted to tweak this, I can go in here and find the endpoints, which is kind of tough. But you see, like, so the duplicates come from the spline, from the original, and the original is following the spline. So, all this stuff is still sort of, related to each other, and you can make those changes if you can get in there and find the pieces. It's kind of hard to see where. There's got to be one in here somewhere. Well, anyway, so you see what I'm saying here is that you can still, like, I could tweak this and get the spline to work better, and it would update, all these guys, right? Yeah, I can actually even still come back to the original ball wherever he is. There it is. And since they're duplicates of each other, they're instances. If I said, well, this is getting a little, oops. This is getting a little dense. I could come in here and boop, boop. There it is. I could say, well, this is too big. They'll all change, and I could decrease the density if they're too, taking up too much render time, or maybe they're not big enough.
But then could you choose individual ones that aren't the original and just alter it by itself?
Not until you deleted the history on them. That would break the, this would be the way to sort of get them into place. Like, and then if you wanted to, make changes to them, like, there we go. So if you did come in here and, broke the history, now I can change that one, whereas I can't change these because until I grabbed all this stuff and I broke the history, then I can do what I want with these, because now they're their own objects, Okay. I don't know why I'm not getting. There we go. So I can rotate these all separate, but until you break the history, they're all going to be sort of no, they're going to be related to each other, and then when you're done with that, you can kill the original, and they all stay there, and you've just sort of decorated the tree. So this works for all kinds of stuff you could make. This would be a great way to model a string of pearls, obviously. Instead of putting them one by one along a spline, you could just do one zip and then duplicate them all around, and then just either break it, or you could actually just leave it there, and then that would allow you to animate the spline and stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do with this that obviously you can't do with your duplicate special. There's no way to do anything like this with duplicate special, and who wants to sit and pose these one by one? It would really suck, So that's why. So this way you could, even if you're just saying, well, I want to get a bunch of them on there, and then I'm, like you said, going to customize them. I'm gonna blow some of them away. I'm gonna blow some of them up. You can move them around, whatever you want to do. The cool, but which leads me to nicely, sort of organically, into the next tool that's really cool, especially for things that are more organic, and you're looking to add. Lots of times you're looking to add randomness to stuff. Especially when you're trying to make environments or anything like that. If you were trying to make a forest or something like that, obviously you're not going to sit there and place trees one by one and try and make them random one by one. You're going to try and find a way to automatically add that randomness. Putting junk on the ground or something. Putting rocks on in an environment, same thing. And so there's a bonus tool to help you out with that. And once again, since these are free, I don't think there's any reason not to talk about them. Everybody can have these. But what they have is in modify. So bonus tools, modify, randomize transforms. Okay, you open this up and you'll get this guy. Okay, and it's really cool because it shows it to you live. What you're doing, right? So you can translate. Translate meaning move. You can rotate, and you can scale randomly, right? And you can control whether you want them to sort of do it on make changes on one axis, or do you want to make it on all axis, or whatever you want to do, right? So I'll show you what you get when you do the scale randomness. So what you have here is essentially an amount and then the multiplier per axis, right? So for rotation, if I said 360, that would give me a random possibility of rotating in 360 degrees. And if I leave it at 1, it means that basically all axes of rotation are sort of up for rotation randomly, you know, in 360 degrees, meaning like pure chaos, right? If I said 50%, that mean in 0.5 here, sorry, that means that the object would only rotate half of whatever the rotation range is. So if I said 360 degrees, only 180 degrees would be possible. So somewhere in there, it's going to pick a random number in there in 360 in 180 degrees, right? Same thing with scaling. Okay, if I say I'm going to allow 50% scaling, it's going to pick a number between 0 and 50 and do that, right? If I go 0.5, it's going to do between 0 and 25 and blah, 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 right? So I'm going to say uniform scale, and then I'm just going to just start tweaking this number up. And oops, I included the, what the hell? So you see what's going on here is the more you bring this up, the smaller some get, the bigger other ones get, okay? So like I said, very handy. Like if these were rocks, you know, and I had them laying around and I was looking for that randomness, obviously you would see that, you know, it's instantly creating randomness, you know. And if you hit new seed, what that basically does is it gives it a different random number to sort of plug into all the values. So if you don't like what you see, you can just hit random seed, and it's essentially rolling dice over and over. So the more you hit new seed, the more, you know, until you basically go, oh, I like what I get here. You know, like sometimes things look awful not random, like these two guys are exactly the same, you know. So I'll just keep hitting this. No. Yeah, it's okay. So, okay, so I like that, but then say if you wanted to also make these so that they're more sort of decorating the tree, right? So you want to translate these. So if you start moving these around, you know, you see what's going on here is it's essentially picking a random direction and moving them about that random direction, okay? So if all I'm looking to do is to sort of decorate the tree, I don't want to sort of get too nuts. So I'm going to pick an axis. So that's up and down. And so that, okay, that's one that goes a little far real quick. So I'm gonna bring that way down. Okay, maybe 0.2. Okay, and then the other thing you see here is that, you know, they're not very, you know, the rotation is pretty much the same. So I'll just up the rotation amount just to sort of, you know, randomize that stuff, and you know, there you go. So if you wanted to, you know, then bring these in to be on the tree a little more, you could just, you know, you've got a good start, and you could just sort of, you know, make all this stuff happen a little.
Is that how you would animate it? Like if you wanted like the balls to come off the tree and like go up, could you animate with this tool?
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, there's nothing stopping you from coming in, and let me grab all those. I'm getting the spline too. I'll just blow the spline away. You know, you could say, skip the tree. I'm gonna say this is where I want everybody to end up at 138. I want everybody to end up right here, right? But you could come back over here, maybe move them out. Oh, somebody's getting angry. Hold on 1 second. I'm getting an error for some reason. Modify. There it goes. Oops, I grabbed my tree too. Shit. There. Tools, modify, randomize transforms. There we go. Close. Make sure it's keyed. Maybe move them up and out a bit, and you should get everything going. So yeah, it's, I mean, it's available to do stuff like that, you know, creating that randomness, you know, and like I said, I mean, you'd be shocked how often you need to, you know, find something to create, you know, randomness, and especially deal with stuff, you know, en masse, you know. A good example is, it's like a while back I had to do like a glass that had like you know, condensation on the outside, right? Little droplets of water, right? And instead of, you know, obviously sitting there, you know, placing hundreds and thousands, or not hundreds of thousands, but, you know, thousands of these things, you know, I was able to sort of scatter them around the object randomly, and get them, and then just sort of resize them into different proportions and everything, right? So yeah. So like I said, this guy is a great tool, you know, especially when you you know, when you come in and apply it a couple of times to make sure that you get lots of, you know, randomization, where it's like, you know, you add it in there and then add it a little more. It makes it just a little more subtle. So it's like, you know, big randomness on top of, or small randomness on top of little randomness gets you some nice stuff. So, okay. Oops. Yeah, you could probably even get away. You could probably make, you know, some snow. I mean, the particles would be better for this, but, you know, for this kind of trick, it works pretty decently. Okay. All right. Okay, so one other tool I wanted to show you right in here too, that basically relates to the same concept, and it's a bonus tool again, like I said, but you know, these are free and there's no reason we can't use them, right? So it's called Paint Duplicates on Object, and it does exactly what you would expect, and like I said, this is a great you know, this is another great one for creating randomness or environments or whatever you want to say. So what I'm going to do for my tree here is I'm just going to create a little plane. Okay, so I'm just going to create something to put on the tree, right? So I'm just thinking that. So so your first object can be anything that you want to paint with, right? You know, a good example is, you know, a blade of grass or a little tuft of grass, probably being a better example, right? Because you know, you don't want this to be too complicated, because you're about to create, you know, hundreds of copies, or, you know, potentially hundreds of copies, right? So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna knock my detail. Actually, I'll just make it one. Oops. So one plane. Okay. Now these are going to be instance of each other, so that, you know, I actually don't even need to really decide at the start what this is going to look like, but I'll shrink it down a little bit. So to start out with, you select your what you want to paint with. Like I said, you know, this could be a tuft of grass, it could be a rock, it could be whatever you want it to be, right? Then you select your object to paint onto, and then you hit Paint Duplicate on Object, and I got that out of the bonus tools, Edit, right there. Okay, and it's basically a duplicator that allows you to, like I said, paint on an object. So what you'll get is you'll see I got this. I got a little, you know, just like in sculpting, I got a painting radius. Okay, so as you start to paint, it just, so by default, it's basically just putting stuff right at the vertexes, right? And you kind of have to mess with it to get it to do something cool, right? So so we see here, modify randomized scale, X, Y, and Z scale, which allows me to paint potentially gigantic copies, and the rotation too. So now it's going to put it on there in very weird ways, right? So I'll just do this real quick. Let's see. So it may not seem like I'm doing anything good here, and I'm not really, but it's at least getting me started. Okay. But like I said, the beauty is that, so now I made this mess, but I can come back here to my original, oops, you know, oops, did they not? Oh shit, it didn't make it, sorry, I didn't collect instances. Let me get rid of all this stuff. Sorry about that. Okay, so let me try that again. Boom, boom. Duplicate special. There it is, instance. Okay, so if you want to make sure you want to turn that on if you want to be able to edit after the fact, or you're just, like I said, you're making a mess.
Does a line, like, oriented with reference to, like tangent to the surface?
It picks one, and you need to change that if you're making grass, and I'll show you exactly how that works, because you kind of do need to find your way, because it doesn't necessarily make sense right out of the gate, right? So if I come back here, and like I said, since these are instances, I grab them, and there we go. I'll get them to sort of stand up properly, and now definitely shrink them the hell down, and maybe even try and make them points. Okay, so you can get them to orient properly. Let's see if I can get it to work better on the ground. Go to object mode, paste duplicates, shift to modify. So let me just turn my the best thing to do is to turn off your, see, so now it's actually planting them properly. I don't know why it's planting them. Snap method, UV space. So it's only planting them at the vertices, even though I've said UV space divisions. Huh. It's supposed to be able to paint them just right on the surface. It was before. Let me try it. Restart the tool. Because that's not very random if you only can paint on the vertices. Let's see. Edit. Paint on duplicates. UV space. Instance. Align. Go. There it goes. Okay. There we go. Now I can paint anywhere I want. So I need to restart. When I invoked it, it must have... there we go. So now that's allowing a lot more. So it's in the bummer thing is you don't have control over how much rotation you're allowing. So this would be a good instance just to put these things down and then use the randomizer tool to you know, get them to have different scales and stuff like that, you know. That's right. So it doesn't. So the options only change when you start it up. So duplicate special there. There it goes. Okay. So the higher the number, the more, there we go, the more you can draw inside of a polygon. Okay. So like I said, this would be a good place to, I don't even know why it allowed, there we go. To use the randomize the tool on top of this, you know, sort of to create basic, you know, basic stuff, then come back in, you know, grab them all, and then move, you know, basically scatter them around a little bit better, like so. Like say the bonus tools, modify, randomize transforms. Let's see, there we go. So that's up that. Obviously, one of the axes we don't want to do, Y, so that just makes them, there we go, so that keeps them from flying around, you know, and then rotate them, and then do some scaling, do uniform, so that creates something a little, whoops, a little bit better, maybe a little aggressive. But you see, so it allows you, to paint them down, but then, you know, using the extra tools, you can get them to sort of be a little more organic, you know. And then with, you know, once you get something random like this, you know, you could just duplicate. You know, I just hit Control D. I made another set, and maybe rotate them, you know, as a group, or move them around somewhere else, you know, that kind of stuff. And it's not too bad, you know. So, you know, you could put a little bend in there, you know, in the original piece, and then scatter that around. Or like I said, a good way to do this is with like a tuft of grass, right? Like a little, you know, 10 pieces at once, right? Because, you know, grass rarely comes one freaking little blade at a time, you know, and this looks more like spikes or whatever. But so if I took these and I said, you know, I'm going to take all these guys right here. Obviously make them three-dimensional. These are, you know, these are two-dimensional, and I join those together, you know, that would make like a nice little tuft to push around, you know. And then the same thing with like, you know, rocks, you know, basically make 3 different types of rocks, go in, spread them around, and then come back in and randomize their positions, delete some of them, stuff like that. And, you know, you got something reasonably organic, okay? So those 2 tools in there are surprisingly handy because, like I said, you fight a lot of, you know, very stuff that does not look real because there's no randomness to it. It's all everything's too perfect, you know. So being able to paint things in there versus just duplicate them and hope for the best, and being able to randomize your transforms is really cool. So yeah, so those, like I said, all those kind of relate together within reason because you know, the making the snapshots is cool, and then you know, randomizing what happens with them adds in obviously a nice degree of interest and randomness, hence the randomness stuff. Okay. Okay. So one other thing I wanted to talk about real quick that I think I've gone into a little bit, but I just wanted to come back around to real quick because this is something that you hit every once in a while, and you want to do something about it. I think I answered this for some people, and maybe not to everybody, but you know, objects, you know, especially glass and things like that in Arnold, you know, when you go to render glass and well, mainly glass, honestly, or a lot of translucent objects, you know, glass. The shadow coming off of glass lots of times is something you can almost ignore, right? But it's also something that lots of times messes up the renderer, right? Because there are a lot of physical stuff that it's showing you, but it's not perfect, right? So, you know, we've hit issues, or some people have hit issues where they're trying to make something and it's got glass and it's all black, and they're trying to figure out why. Anyways, what you can do is you can essentially just trick the renderer and just say, hey, just don't bother trying to, you know, deal with that, right? And what that is there's a bunch of render switches that are available to you that that you can tweak to change that kind of stuff. Okay, so every object, you know, we talked about has its where am I? Sorry, it's transform, and you know, the hooks for transform and all that stuff. That's the first tab always, you know, whether you're rotating your scale and dealing with the pivots. And remember, we talked about limits and all that good stuff. We didn't talk too much about this stuff, but we don't really need to so much. So, but on the next one, where it starts to get into in the next tab in your attribute editor, it gets into some other stuff about the object, right? So the first one is largely holding transform information and sort of just how to deal and look at the or sort of display the object in the viewport, right? The second one gets into sort of more the nitty gritty about the object, okay? And that's, you know, lots of times it's called shape. I'm not entirely sure why, but it is what it is, okay? But one of the things you'll see is render stats, okay? So every object, whether it's using Arnold or not, has this tab, but you'll also notice here that there's another tab for Arnold, right? If we didn't have Arnold installed, obviously we wouldn't get this. And if you had another render installed, you might actually get a different tab, right? So anyhow, you know, render stats show you, you know, just some of the, it should be called render options. I don't know why it's called stats, because you're not getting any freaking statistics out of it. So I don't understand why it's called that. But you'll see here that you can make objects cast shadows or not. By default, they do. And receive shadows or not, right? So for glass objects, turning those off will lots of times solve your problems if you're not getting what you think you should get out of a glass object, okay? Lots of times this happens on objects that are thin, like you know, like eyeglasses that you wear, or windshields and stuff like that. That they can cause problems. So, like I said, lots of times you can turn that off and you won't notice any difference, except things will stop sucking as much. So just remember that you can control these things and you can turn those things on and off. Okay, and you've got a few other different things. Holdout messes with the math that we won't talk about so much now. Motion blur turns on and off motion blur if you're rendering it. By default, we're not rendering motion blur, and motion blur is when an object, if you see it when you take a cell phone photo and everything's all whacked out because somebody is running by, or you move the camera or something, and it's got motion blur because things are in motion and they're blurry, right? So you can turn that off if you want an object to not be computing that. If you're computing it, it's a thing that's expensive to render. So any objects that you can turn that off with, or turn that off is good. So the other important ones to note here too are visible and reflections and visible and refractions. This is another thing that sometimes you get into an issue where you want to turn that off. You don't want an object to show up in your reflections for some reason or another. A light that's just too much, like say you made a mesh light, you can turn that off. And then same thing for refractions, meaning the things going through an object, okay? Double-sided is meaning like if it goes to render, these objects here, like these ones that the little planes of grass that I made, by default it would compute, even though we only see gray on this side and then we see black because this is the underside of the plane. By default, it actually will render it for you and give you both sides, right? And it may give you something weird, but it'll try and render it, right? If you turn that off and I went like this, the object would not appear in the renderer, okay? It just basically disappears. This is the way that it used to be, and now the renderers largely just handle it so that you don't have to worry so much about objects that don't have depth or whatever, or don't have depth, But it's not something to rely on. You want to model the other side of an object. It's really lazy to just go, oh, it'll render the other side, because it makes a weird, perfectly flat plane where it's like if I was animating this and I went like that, the object would disappear for a frame and then come back out versus have like a little line that should be there. So, like I said, that's just bad practice. So, I mean, you could leave it on, but you shouldn't rely on it, okay? Okay, so then also in the Arnold tab, you get sort of Arnold specific render stuff, render options, okay, that are actually mirrored somewhat in the, where'd it go? I lost it. Oh, render stats, sorry. So if I click cast shadows here, it actually shows up down here and vice versa. So if I, like I said, these are the same, so they just assume that you're going to jump into the Arnold Arnold options, right? So same thing. You can control cast shadows. You can turn off the diffuse reflection, refraction. All these things that we know about, the default color, the default reflection. Sorry, the transmission, which is the transparency. So you can turn these things off if you need to, and you can make an object not cast shadows on itself. Sometimes that's something you need to do. Not often, but it's available to you. Okay. So the only other thing that you have in here that's actually very cool is that you can also, how we we talked about subdivision surfaces, and that if I hit 3 on my keyboard, I get a smooth surface, right? Okay. Now, if you don't have that on, so I'm going to render a frame here real quick. Whew, a little bright. You see, I get a square, right? Even though, like, say I was trying to make this into something that is smooth. Like, if my intent is this, I have to make sure that I'm showing it, okay, or I'm not gonna get that. Now, so now I get my rounded edges. Let me figure out why I'm not seeing. Oh, let me turn this light down real quick. 10. Okay. There we go. And go back to perspective. See, this is holiday appropriate, right? It's like a Christmas tree. Did you catch that?
Yeah.
I thought about it. I was like,
wait. Christmas? Now I get it. Okay, so here's the
Ornaments gave you away.
Yeah, the ornaments. So he you know, like I said, here's my intent. You know, the smooth object, right? So what you can do, you know, and like I said, unless you have that turned on, you know, and it can slow down your viewport, you're not gonna get the smooth object, right? So what you can do in the Arnold tab is you can turn it on so that it does it automatically. Where'd it go? Wait. Nope. Hold on. Sorry. I'm in the wrong tab. No, smooth. Wait. No. Hold on. Oh, subdivision. Jesus. Sorry. There it is. Sorry. It's in a sub rollout of Arnold. So anyway. So if I'm gonna roll this stuff up. So I'm still under the run Arnold tab, but it's got its own subdivision computer, right? So by default, you know, it's not on, so I would just I would get a box out of it. But if I go to Cat Clark, which is the type of smoothing that it's going to do, I can turn that on, and then I can bump that up to maybe 3, right? So I could go through and I could render, or I could animate with this guy, this really, really light, you know, box that's, you know, whatever, 36 polygons or something, right? But when I render it, it's going to go and it's going to do this subdivision computing for me before it sends it to the rendering. So it's doing that without me having to even deal with it, right? So if you have an object that you know that you want to use subdivision services on and you want to smooth it, if you turn that on, it's just going to handle it for you. And it's really nice because, first of all, it does a really particularly good job. So I can still check it out here by hitting 3 on my keyboard and taking a look at it, right? But like I said, I could animate with this very, very simple object, but at render time, since I have that number on, or that on there, it's going to smooth it down for me. Very cool. It's really nice, like I said, and you also the nice thing about it too is that, you know, it's doing all these it's doing 3 iterations, meaning like smoothing it 3 times, sort of without a lot of sort of compute overhead, right? So this is definitely the way to do it, especially when using Arnold, because you could actually turn it up to 4 to make something insanely smooth if you really wanted to. Okay, because now I could, like, if I go to 1, let's see what it looks like at 1. Yeah, see, so it's still blocky, but if I go up to 4, it should be absolutely perfectly smooth. Yeah. Okay, so it's just it's an option that's available to you. You can turn it on in here and forget about it. You know, you could, you know, like I said, if you go between 1 and 3 on your keyboard, you know, like when you start to get a heavier scene going, you're going to want to try and keep the scene as light as humanly possible, and this allows you to do that, because only at render time is it going to do that that smoothing. Okay, and like I said, you don't even need to worry about it. So it's very cool. So that's it's in the Arnold. So the Arnold rollout has like a few different things, and it's got stuff to deal with volumes and displacement, which we haven't talked about. But one of the ones is subdivision, export. We don't really need to talk about. And then we talked about the visibility options, and those are the things about casting shadows. And you can actually turn off primary visibility, which make the object not render. So that's really cool. I don't know exactly. I've never used that, and I don't know why you would want it, but there it is. I guess you could potentially make it so that it may still cast shadows. Yeah, so with primary visibility off and cast shadows on, it casts shadows as if it was there, but it's obviously not there anymore. So, like I said, I'm not entirely sure why you would want that, but there it is. Okay. Okay. So we've got that. One other thing that I wanted to talk about is that I definitely glossed over when we were modeling, because it's kind of a sloppy way to do things, and I didn't really want to show everybody sort of how to do it very much, so that people don't use it as a crutch. And I think that we sort of did enough, modeling with the regular tools to sort of show you how this works and how you can use it. Sometimes, sometimes it's a lifesaver, but most of the time it's just really lazy. Okay, and they're called booleans, okay, and they're basically operations that allow you to subtract and or add objects together. Yeah, to add objects together. Just yeah, I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so here's an example. Okay, so I have a circle. Okay, or no, sorry, a sphere. Okay, and I duplicate it, and I have another sphere. And I'm going to say, okay, I want sphere number 2 to be subtracted from sphere number 1. Okay, so I'm going to hit this one. I'm going to hit that one. I'm going to go to mesh booleans. Okay, and they have their own little rollout. Okay, and I'll just break it off here. So union adds them together. Difference takes one out of the other, and intersection shows you where they intersect. Okay. So if I hit difference, I'll get what I just said there. Okay, it took number 1 or number 2 and it chunked it out of number 1, right? So you think, well, that's great, that's handy, that's cool or whatever. The problem with these things is that they're really sloppy, and they're just sloppy, I guess is the best way to say it, and that like this may look decent from where we're sitting, and it would actually render. Potentially should render fairly decently. Let's see what we get. Excuse me. Okay. And in fact, it didn't really. You see this crap right here? Like, this is because it's, all it's doing is going through polygon by polygon and saying, where do these guys collide with each other? And where do I need to snip? And see what you end up getting here is, I've got a 5-point polygon. Oh no, even more, sorry. So I've got a polygon that before was a nice quad, right? Now has a point here, a point there, a point right next to it, a point in the middle, and then another one, right? That's why we're getting weird smoothing stuff in through here, right? So let me render closer. Yeah, you see this crap? Like, this is the kind of stuff that booleans do, and you think, well, great, then like let me just smooth that. So I'll hit go back and I'll hit 3 on my keyboard, and it's even worse because you see all this disgusting mess here. Yeah, because we I mean, it's just bad, So when you render it, I mean, it's just a fiasco, right? So, like I said, like, okay, then why do these even exist, But the thing is, it's like, if you think about this, what I just made here, this little super Death Star with a super hole in it, like, how else would you make this so that this hole is perfect, right? Well, meaning like a perfect, semicircle and a perfect sphere, right? Well, you can't really, right? So what you can do with this tool is sort of use it as, it sort of gets you started, but then you have to sort of clean things up. Like, you need to, first of all, sort of feed it properly, but then also sort of clean it up, properly. And what I mean by that is, essentially, before you go to do this, and probably the best way to do this would be, let me just tell you what, I'll just delete this first one, duplicate, I'm going to come up here. So if I was trying to, like I said, make my little Death Star here, I'm going to go like this, and it's all about looking up at what's going to happen here, right? So by moving this object exactly on top of the other, and also this is where it pisses it off, but I'm going to at least do a clean cut, because like I said, it just goes through polygon by polygon, and it goes, okay, this guy versus this guy, what do I get? And it says, well, okay, you chop here and blah, 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 right? So this potentially might turn out reasonably clean. There. Okay, so since I just took the same object and I moved it very carefully so that everything's still lined up, I think, yep, see, even that didn't go perfectly well, right? Because it does get confused when things are like, see, I'm going to undo what I did. Uh-oh, there it goes. It actually gets confused when things are sort of too easy. Like, you see this, since I literally just took a copy of this sphere and moved it up into place, like I said, these lines, are, perfectly aligned. You can see right there, right? But like I said, like, sadly to say, that actually makes things more difficult for booleans. Lets me do it again. Difference, I cut my hole and, you know, I could rotate into place. You know, too big, but whatever. Okay, so hit 3 again, and like I said, what you see here is something's wrong in through here, and I got to go figure out what the heck happened. So here it looks like I've got a couple there. So see that, like, you know, when it goes to do it, it does it sloppy. So like I've got two vertices that look like they're right on top of each other, but instead are sort of like this, and that's why when I smooth I get this. So, you know, now I got to go in and handle these issues, you know, and it's not the end of the world. Like sometimes just a simple merge down or clean up. So I'll go back here, even though they're on top of each other, and I always forget where it's at. Yell if you see. Oh, merge. There it is. I can do a merge with a really low. There we go. Okay, so that cleaned it up. Okay, so that was legitimate. But you see everything I just went through here. Like, you know, instead I could have just made a spline and cut this in there, then revolved it, and I'd have been done instead of dealing with that. And that was a good scenario. Okay, let me show you a couple other scenarios real quick. Okay, so take that guy, get rid of it. And I'll just take cubes. Oh, take a couple cubes. And take another, duplicate it, make another one. So say I was gonna, cut this one out of there. And like I said, you think, well, let me try and do this as cleanly as possible. There's not really a great way, so I'll take this one minus that one. That's difference. Oh, and great, I got this, I got a nice hole in there. But like I said, if I needed to smooth it, and I probably do, to even get decent edges on here, look what happens to it, because we've got weird points here versus, they should wrap around here. We've got a crappy corner, all this stuff, so that, you don't get what you expect, versus if I just, took a cube and used our other, used all the other stuff that we learned. Like if I wanted to put that, that same gap in the, that same, divot in the middle there. I mean, even if I wanted to be sloppy about it, I could do this. Oops, that, and that's still, legitimate. I still get it. I still get what I expect out of it versus this fiasco, like that. Okay, so like I said, this is slopped in because I didn't handle where the corners are, but it's not so bad. I could even, oops, I could come in here and put an edge loop in there, and hold the top. I guess that would probably work over here too, but yeah. So you see what I'm saying? This is all a mess. Whereas I could come over here and I could clean this up and do other stuff with it. So okay. So then on top of that, once again we have oops, it's a little much. There we go. Okay. So if I duplicated this, and then, like I said, what I think where it sort of does best is when you do addition, which is a bit of a bummer because where you would really like it to be able to work is cutting into other objects. So if I went like this and I did union, that gives you, the two objects together, okay? And sometimes this behaves a bit better than. Yep, see, it did the same thing. So for some reason, as it goes along, it sort of decides that some of these things aren't on top of each other, and instead of sort of cleaning it up after the fact, you have to clean it up after the fact. So, like hot dog, but like I was saying, every once in a while this comes in very, actually handy in that it's worth it to do a boolean because there's no other way of sort of doing making that change that you want to make, getting good results. Okay, and I guess like I said, a good example is it would be something that's like a circle. Okay, and a lot of times the sort of the easiest way around it is first of all to use something with more detail, so that even if it has imperfections, they're not so bad. So if I take one of these, where is it? There it is. Okay, so I take one of these guys, which is this n-gon thing here, right? Or they call it a platonic, right? And I bump up the detail, okay, and I duplicate it, shrink it. And sometimes you want sometimes the best way to do this is just to throw a lot of detail at it and just let it do its thing, right? So in fact, tell you what, let's bump this up even a little more. There we go. And same with this one. So if it does have issues, they're sort of hidden in a way. Out of hell with it. Okay, so now I'm gonna do a difference to cut that out of there. So now once again, so the edges are so small that it's like even if I smooth it, I kind of get away with it because I have a lot of detail. Let me turn the edges off. Yeah, so, it still has its problems, but you could come in here and try and fix some of these. But you saw when I did it on a bigger scale, they really jump out at you. Whereas it's like with a bunch of detail minus a bunch of detail gets you something that's okay, right? So, like I said, you could come in here and, the easiest way would be to just kind of, what am I looking for? Multi-cut. So if you came along in here and like slice these up to kind of just add a little edge. Okay, so now I'm just sort of, it's almost like just a little barrier fence between the crappiness and the rest of the model. So yeah, like you see this, like that's a mess, but it'll be so small it won't be so bad. Oops, that's crappy. I think you may have noticed I'm not the biggest fan of booleans, but I just wanted you guys to be aware that they're available. If you're like, well, I can't figure out for the life of me how I'm gonna do this. They're not something to rely on a lot, but sometimes you'll hit a problem that just can't be solved by anything except, cutting an object out of another object. Ooh. So okay, so if I back out now and smooth that, yeah, see, so that cleaned that part up. It's not perfect, and if you had to zoom in here, it really turns to hell right there. But like I said, you could clean that up. You could figure out why, why there's so much stuff going on in there, and like I said, you can make it better. You can make it work. So, by not using, these regular spheres like I used over here, by using this platonic solid, and then which is kind of a random. It's not random, but you know what I mean. It's not like so perfectly segmented that you know what polygon is going against the other polygon. Then you get a better result. Like I said, this is not that bad. Especially it's like if it was an olive and you were gonna put it over here, like done. Like that's not so bad. But once again, there's a bunch of other ways to make an olive. Like it's not the great. It's just. Like I said, they're just, not that great, if you ask me. So, then the last one I didn't go through is I haven't gone through intersect yet. Intersect is a similar situation in that you can take this, go like that, and maybe duplicate another and come down here. So the place that you can get away with these, and obviously we're not going to cover, is CAD programs. Booleans are extremely legal or work very nicely in CAD programs because they're using something very different. When we're dealing with polygons, we're getting what you're seeing here. But just FYI, if you ever need to make something very, very detailed like this, that's where CAD programs shine. So I'm just going to take one piece. I'm gonna make kind of a mouse here, like a really bad mouse. Oh, there we go. That's okay. So this minus this. Oh no, sorry. I was trying to show you intersection. So this and that, the intersection between the two gives you that. Okay. but you run in, once again, they all do the same thing. They all give you the sort of the same situation, in that if I need to smooth it, it's less than stellar along it. Wherever it cut, it's gonna be less than stellar, and you got stuff to fix or clean up. Okay. So yeah, yeah, that's booleans, and like I said, I mean, you'll know the issue when you come to it. You know, I think that a lot of it is solved nowadays by this guy. You know, like, because lots of times you needed to get this tool right here, because you needed to get perfect circles made in objects. You know, lots of times you need to, you know, cut a little hole for this or that or the other, and this thing right here doing that is a lifesaver, because now you've got your circle, and now I can just make whatever, you know, like previously people would use a boolean to do this and get a really crappy result, and instead, you know, this is still a nice legal, it's just beautiful, you know, like that's a nice little divot in there, you know. So these tools are a lifesaver, because, you know, like I said, in the past, to get a perfect circle, either you had to hand move the points to a circle and then make this, or, you know, you had to find another way, and sometimes people would result to booleans for that and get a crappy-ish result. So let me just do it. So yeah, we're like I said, this tool is pretty sweet. So use it and know it. All right. Oops. Not close enough. Yeah, that's a really nice result. So okay. I have one last thing to show you. And this is kind of a cool tool also, because you know, lots of times in sort of you know, artwork that you get from people, you know, like you have to find a way to translate it into 3D, right? And they have a really cool tool to help you out with that in the Modify. In Modify, they have a bunch of convert tools in the Modify tool panel that we didn't talk a ton about, but they've got, like I said, they've got some neat stuff in here. One of them that's really handy is polygon edges to curve, right? Lots of times you need reference to you know, make something else that needs to be like on an object or something like that, and this is a good example, right? So say I needed to take this edge right here, and I wanted to, you know, make something that oh, I guess a good example would be like if I wanted something to rotate, like orbit this little area right here perfectly, right? But I don't have a spline around there, and it would be particularly difficult if, actually, tell you what, let's do it this way. So I wanted it to orbit the surface on this weird, you know, surface, you know, like right on the surface. So anyways, one of the things you can do is polygon edges to curve, right? And you just select your edges, and then boom, you get a curve out of that, right? Which you can do any of the normal things that you would do with that. You know, you could make an object out of it. You could use it as a path to make other objects. You could, you know, whatever, like I said, whatever you would possibly, whoops, select the wrong ones. Well, whatever. But like, you know, once again, like if I wanted to do what I just said, I could then take my sphere. Oops, too big. 0.1. Select that guy. Go back to animation, constrain, motion path, attach to motion path. So now, over time, that guy goes, whoop, you know, but also follows that nice contour there. So this is handier than you might think, you know, at first blush, because you know, you could use this as a loft path, meaning like, you know, to extrude an object along here, like if you wanted to create something that just files it just perfectly, or you know, like say you had a character and you wanted to put a belt on that person, right? You know, like you could get a spline from the whatever area you want to put that belt on, you know, or even a pair of them, and then do a loft between the two of them, and it would follow the body contours exactly. You know, there's a bunch of uses for this guy, but you know, that's a really cool one, is basically because you can extract anything you want, and you can do it as many times as you need. So, you know, I can grab this edge and polygon to curve, and now I've got this. Oops. and you know, say I wanted to then like go back to modeling, and I could do a a planer, which essentially makes a nice, just makes a plane out of, you know, a ruled plane that I could then come in and I could extrude. Oh crap! No. It made a NURBS plane. Polygons. Apply. There. Since I'm not working around the 0, it's giving me a lot of hassle. So it made a really shitty NURBS or polygon plane. But if you went in there and changed the options, it would be a lot better. So, but I'll just get the faces and oops, you know, and you can make something that now just fits right on that object, or you know, whatever you might need out of it. Okay, so like I said, very, very handy. Polygon edges to curve. Okay, then some of these other things are just what you would expect. And you know, we didn't talk much about these because we're trying to stay away from NURBS and stuff, but you know, you can, you know, do that stuff. Okay, so if you go through these, you know, like I said, like there's a bunch of different ones, but you know, like I'm just going to talk about a couple of the cool ones here. Okay, and the other one I want to talk about here is texture to geometry, which is a really weird kind of unique tool. And that what it does is it takes an input image and it basically analyzes it and makes a object out of it, right? So for instance, what I grabbed here is, so I have this maze, okay? So you could draw this any way you want. You know, you could draw it on your phone or on a piece of paper and take a picture of it or whatever, get it into black and white, and you're ready to go, right? So I just downloaded this actually. So this is a maze. It's reasonably, I think it's not even that detailed, right? So, you know, if you didn't want, you know, if you wanted to make something a little more organic, you could, like I said, you could draw this up with a Sharpie or something like that, and away you go, right? So, and instead of modeling it in the computer, right? So anyway, so I'm going to hit open. I'm going to undo fit to selection, which basically is trying to make it fit to another object. And I'm going to leave the options at the default. You can mess with them, and they sort of will either create a denser mesh or a less dense mesh. And like I said, the easiest way is to hand it something in black and white so that you're sort of guiding it, you know, to what to do, right? So I'm going to hit apply, wait a second, and it's going to, you see down here, detecting features. It's literally analyzing the object. Analyzing. And, all right. Uh-oh. Oh boy. It may have died on me. I may have broken it, yeah. Because it didn't take this long at home, that's for sure. Yeah, I think it took a crap here. Oh wait, no, there it goes. There, oh. Ah. Sorry. Well, let's see. So what you're going to get back is a simple, like, sort of flat mesh, but it, like I said, it's going to follow the contours of the image that I just gave it, right? And you know, this is handy because it basically gets you started, you know, by, like I said, either drawing something, or if somebody says, hey, here's our logo, and you know, hopefully you don't end up doing too many logo things in your career, but you never know. It immediately gets you geometry that you can start doing other stuff with, okay? So when it does come back, you'll see what I get if it comes back. Bummer. There we go. Okay, so it's here somewhere. Uh-oh. There it is, maze. Okay. There. Okay, so yeah, this is what you get out of it, okay? And, you know, it may just look like a you know, like I said, it's a flat plane, but the beauty is that it went in and it contoured the whole thing so that you can get rid of what you don't want and keep what you do, right? And the easiest way to do it is you come back up, you come to your hypershade, right? Because what it's done is it actually, it's made an object with a couple of different materials, a black material and a white material, and you can just select the white material and get rid of it, right? So if you come over to my hypershade here, and I just go like this, select objects with material, that'll actually select faces with material, delete, oh, there's a couple of them. Oh, no, keep the black. No, oh wait, there it is. There. Boom. Scale that up. Rotate it down-ish. And like I said, I mean, I can do whatever I need to with it. So I'm going to grab my outlines and give it some depth. Like so. Boom. Maze, you know? Like, without a whole lot of, you know, I didn't have to go in here and make this, or I didn't have to sort of deal with, you know, drawing it out or any of the normal ways. Like, you know, you could, like I said, you could literally draw it with a Sharpie, take a picture of it, and there you go, you know. It also performs really, really well on stuff that's more square or you know, sort of, you know, this is really organic, so it actually, I'm hoping that's why it took a little longer than it should, but
how'd you take the what out?
With hypershade, and then finding the surfaces that are white, and then like this. So here's all the surfaces in the scene. See, it actually makes ones called Maze 01 Convert Shader Maze blah blah. You know, so there's a whole bunch of them. Actually, I'll just get rid of. So, anyways, if you right click and hit select objects with material, that actually grabs the faces that have the material assigned. Okay, so, and I think it makes just a, yeah, it makes a shitty Lambert shader. I think that's this. Like so. There it goes. So yeah, it's really cool. It's very handy. So it's gonna, you know, like I said, it's just gonna work on, you know, 2D objects. Oop. Oh, damn it! I did it again. Oh, good, it stopped. Let me. I'm gonna do one more, and I'll show you what I get out of it. It like I said, it really likes good clean, images. Yoo-hoo. All right. Hilarious. I went and grabbed this one. It's like crop circles, and it works out fairly decent. And then the maze, and then what's this guy? Oh, that was for terrain. Okay, let me try one more. Create. No, sorry, modify. Convert. Convert. Texture to oh shit. Texture to geometry. Select your image. Boom, boom. I think this one worked. So I did this before. Turn off fit to selection. Apply. So it actually cruises through this because it's all just straight lines. That was my point. See how it just ripped through that? Why it makes it teeny tiny, I don't know, but that's what it does. You see, what we get here is that, and like I said, if I come in here, I grab my, see, surfaces it creates, CU3 converted shader. There's the black that I want to keep, or no, the black I want, yeah, I need to get rid of the black, so I just select on that, selects the faces in the thing, delete, and I'm left with what I want. Come on, edges, and extrude. Very nice. I mean, it's a big time saver. You know, you could sit there and trace this for a bunch of time. There's, you know, it could, this whole thing could become quite an ordeal versus, you know, if the art's good, the 3D object's going to be really good. If the art is crappy and low res, it's going to be crappy. But once again, sometimes it's easier to remake objects in programs that you are more, you know, are more familiar with or like better. You know, like sometimes people like Photoshop better or Illustrator, you know, and they would rather do all this stuff over there versus, like, you know, trying to bash around Maya trying to trace this thing out or whatever. See, there we go. It's pretty nice. Not too shabby. So that was the last sort of, like I said, this is just tidbits and tweaks and whatnot. And those are all that I had for today. Yeah, that's all of them. So like I said, go easy on the booleans, but if you ever run into a problem where you can't think of a way to sort of, you know, get an object out of another object, then sometimes they're necessary, but most of the times they just cause more problems than they're worth. Yeah, and then, like I said, remember these bonus tools are really, really handy. They're free and they're always out there. So, you know, like I said, I like paint duplicates on objects, and I also really like I like Randomise tool a whole lot. It's really handy because you can see it as you go. But that is all. That's all we wanted to talk about today. So thanks for listening, and that is the last lecture of this semester. Thank y'all.